And oh no.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the After 9 show. My name is Pastor Sarah, and I have with me Pastor Brian Chimatero, and I have Violet Chimatero with me. And we are here to talk to you today about the message that we're going to learn today. So if you don't know, what the After 9 show is supposed to recreate is just a few buddies talking after service about what we learned, what we got out of it, what stood out to us. And I told Violet before we sat down that I had a couple things stand out to me, but I wanted to know before if you guys had something stand out to you.
You know, I think one of the things that I thought was really interesting for me was while I was in worship, I had this kind of thought process going back to Samson. Right? And we prayed on that barrenness, I told you, first and foremost on Thursday night at our Lighthouse Flow.
Yeah.
And then I watched a previous message that we did on consecration.
Okay.
And that also was on Samson. So I was like, all of this kind of lined up. And then all of a sudden I decided, hey, I want to deliver the word on this about Samson and barrenness and the shift that happens. And then I realized that she had it all in her notes anyways.
Oh.
Right? So I think the first thing that I kind of wanted to point out was just that everything often kind of syncs together in a harmony.
Yes.
Right? And so I really feel like that is part of, what's happening, right? Was sometimes, when the children of Israel, for instance, were in captivity, they didn't ultimately know their purpose. But Noah's parents didn't know their purpose, right? John the Baptist's parents didn't know their purpose, right? But in each of those circumstances, the barrenness brought forth the purposes of God in the next season.
Right. That's really good.
Yeah.
Right? And that was kind of, their message today was on purpose. So
Yeah, it's really good.
Very interesting.
What about you, Vi?
I thought it was very fascinating that the opening was that purpose is not related to you and personally what you can accomplish and all these different things and your friends and your whatever and this and that, but it's directly related to other people and what you can bring to the table for the bigger purpose.
Yeah.
So with Samson and he could have done whatever he wanted with whatever the power that God gave him and the anointing that he had on his life, but he didn't. He used it for the good in the end.
Yeah, that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, based on Pastor Karen, what she was saying this morning, so I get the notes ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows this. This is my job. And that whole section on Samson was not in her notes.
Oh.
So I don't know if it was a last minute
added
plot twist.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so I think it's kind of cool how you touched on that.
Yep.
But I mean, I think it's neat. And I liked when they were talking about, the idea was that Samson died in the coming forward of his purpose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that at the end of everything that God still knew that he was going to redeem the situation, right?
Right. Yep.
Fortunately, Samson died. But I mean, he got to go to heaven, so we're good.
Right,
We're
right.
good.
It all works out in the end.
And the crazy thing about Samson's life is that they didn't really talk too much about all of it, but the guy messed up time and time again.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? I mean, his whole life was full of different shortcomings and failures, but God knew each of those, and that was going to bring about the purposes of God in all of those
That's right.
shortcomings.
Yep. That's really cool.
So I think that's kind of neat. So I want to kind of go back, if I can ask you guys a question, though. So they brought out kind of...
Who's hosting here,
I know,
Pastor
you guys
Brian?
are-
I had a question, but
You
I was
had a
like,
question.
well, no,
You-
you go ahead.
Oh.
Let's hear yours question, and then we'll come to me.
Well, I was just going to say they were bringing out 5 points today.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And, the first... And I was just wondering if you guys remembered what any of the points were.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I remember... I remember that we are created for God, to serve God, right? What about you? Do you remember the rest of them?
Yeah, I
before?
do.
You were created first for worship.
Yeah, for worship.
Second,
to
we were
serve.
created for fellowship.
Yep.
Then we were created to be like God.
Yep.
And then I kind of couldn't quite figure out the fourth one at the moment. Right?
Well,
but I got the first three off top of my head.
Well, I was running slides and also setting up, so that might have been my fault that we didn't hit the fourth. But no, there was a good chunk of reasons that we were. But the one thing they were talked about was that we have dominion, that we were created to have dominion over every living thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what God says.
Yes.
And then he talked about the one, what was that guy's name? I don't know, it was a weird name. But he said that everything under the moon was created to serve man.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, Pastor Brian?
Well, first of all, it says, that God gave man the dominion over the whole earth.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have dominion over the whole earth, then everything in the earth is meant to be under the dominion of man and serve for the purposes of man.
Yes.
Right. So I think, he brought it out many different ways, but I think it's pretty straightforward that everything that God has created was created for a purpose.
Yes.
Like pigs were created, to be the bottom feeders.
Yes.
Right. They clean up the garbage of the earth. That's the same thing that happens in the seas and the oceans. We have different lobsters and so forth that do these things. So I think that everywhere that we look, everything is designed, yes, to be able to help the habitation of man, to be able to help the purposes of man, to be able to feed man, all those different things, right? What do you think, Violet?
I find it interesting that like even all of these things were created before man even was put on the earth, and it was all prepared beforehand for man. Like it wasn't just something that was like, oh, man needs this, like we gotta fix it for them, we gotta whatever. It was like, this is it's prepared. This is like where you're walking in it.
That's really good.
That's what I found interesting. I
think too, it's interesting to see, like, he talked about it, everything from an elephant to a mosquito, he said, right? Yep. And as humans, I always am like, what's my purpose? What am I doing with my life? What's going on? And I think there's always that sense of like, am I fulfilling what I'm supposed to, why am I alive?
Right.
Am I fulfilling it? Have I already fulfilled it? And, there's promises in the Bible that says that as long as there's breath in our lungs, that we have a purpose, right? And so based on what Pastor Brian was saying, that everything that we've been created for is centered around God. And if you don't have God and you're living out your life trying to find what's my purpose, why am I alive? It's as simple as you're here to serve, you're here to worship, you're here, it says let everything that has breath praise the Lord, right? So I think it's an interesting thing because I think that as humans, as relational people, we're meant to be looking for our purpose. And I think that it's just something that, like Pastor Brian touched on, like being married. If you don't know what your purpose is and you're married, your purpose is to be married and to be whatever with your spouse. But I think there's a lot more to purpose than that, right? So it's like the season of your life, what you're in and what you're doing. Is it serving? Is it worshiping? Is it honoring God?
Right.
Yeah, I think we're always looking for like these like big defining the end of the road purpose for our lives, and life, and I've come to realize, just simplicity is that it's not always the end of the road that is the purpose. It's and I hate to use the old analogy, right? But the journey is the importance of it, right? So, I think we're preaching a message coming up on that. The same thing. It was like every step that Christ did was not just about his destinations. It was about purposes that were accomplished along the way.
Right.
And I think we can be in the purposes of God while we are journeying, and we're meant to do that while we're journeying and not just always arrive at destination to destination.
That's right.
And I think that's where we kind of get ourselves into trouble. Right. A lot of times it's just like, I'm not in the purposes of God because I haven't arrived at whatever destination is that I'm looking for.
It's like that expectation.
Yeah. And I found myself in that boat a lot over the years too, where it's just like, I haven't done this, or I haven't accomplished this, or I'm not doing this. Right. And I think it's taken me a long time to really realize that there's lots of purpose in our life without the final steps.
Yeah. Well, we have hit our time. It's been fast and furious. But just in closing, Pastor Brian, do you have any final about 10-second words to say to the people, to the good people?
I think kind of just that wrap up that last point. Just that, what purpose is something that is continuous in nature. It's not just a singularity of moments in time. Yeah.
And we're always looking and striving and believing that as we grow and mature in salvation and our faith and all these things, that our purpose is going to grow and move as well. Right? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Violet and Pastor Brian, for joining me here at the After 9 show. We have, tomorrow we have the young adults starting up again. If you want more information on that, feel free to reach out to me. And we have a kids church event happening on March 1st. So if you want more information about that, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow at the Lighthouse. Do you have something to say, Pastor Brian? Oh, you were looking like you were about to.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, and don't forget to light the passion within you, and we'll see you tomorrow at 6:30 at the Lighthouse.